John Thomas used to say that nonprofit organizations can often replace board members when they rotate off with good new ones, but they will never find new founders. To John Thomas, being a founder of something that's good and lasting was an honor to be most proud of. And in that light, I would like to talk tonight about one of the organizations that John Thomas founded, the Black Tie Dinner. It's been mentioned earlier, and I know that a lot of people in here know a whole lot about the Black Tie Dinner. A lot of people in here, some people in here anyway, have been leaders of the Black Tie Dinner. But, and there's that whole thing you could talk about because it is a fantastic event. $17 million raised over these 32 years. It's known all over the country. It's the biggest fundraiser for HRCF. But I'm not going to talk about its success because that's fairly well known. But what is less well known is how on earth exactly did it ever get started? How did it begin? This is how that happened. In the spring of 1982, on a weekend, John Thomas called me and Ray Kukling and asked us if we would come to his house and meet a friend of his from Washington, D.C., named Jim Foster. Well, since it was John inviting us, or inviting me, separately inviting Ray, I of course said yes, but I said, who is Jim Foster, and why do you want us to meet him? He said, well, he's a friend of mine. I met him in Florida, and he has this proposal to make to us. I said, my red flags went up. I said, is this a fundraiser? And he said, kind of. He said, and I said, John, how are we going to continue to try to shake the same trees over and over again, trying to get new donations out of the same people? I mean, he said, wait. He says, you're right, but this is an interesting proposition. Let's just hear him out. So Ray Kukling's coming over. Let's just decide after we've listened. So I went over that evening, met Jim Foster, this lanky guy, bald, big mustache. And he presented to us this proposition. Jim Foster had been hired by a new organization, relatively new at that time. This was 1982 again, that had been created in Washington, D.C., called the Human Rights Campaign Fund, HRCF. Steve Endine, who was the founding director of HRCF, had hired Jim Foster, who had come from California originally, to be the national fundraising coordinator for HRCF. And Jim Foster had a plan. He had a strategy. How he was going to raise money for this organization was to go, well, setting aside trying to get large donations from wealthy individuals and businesses. He had a strategy that he had learned as a political activist in California that he thought was going to work great for HRCF in Washington. That was to go around the country to large urban areas and get people to host a big, fancy banquet with relatively expensive tickets, and after paying the cost of the event, to send the money left over to Washington to the Human Rights Campaign Fund. He said it would be a great event. $150 ought to be the ticket price. He said, I'm prepared for resistance to this idea, so I will step out and let the three of you talk about it. So we said, well, that's probably a good idea. He left for a while. So there we were looking at each other and trying to decide, well, maybe I was trying to decide, how do we tell this guy no? What were the reasons that we might say no? Number one, $150 in 1982 is what $457 is today. So it's like having a little dinner party at a big hotel and asking your friends to pay $457 per ticket for an organization they had never heard of, was only 2 years old. No one knew Steve Endine or Jim Foster from Adam. And to retain or reserve a banquet room at a big hotel, which was his plan, was going to be a costly commitment, and we were probably going to have to guarantee it personally. But more than any of that, one of the best reasons to say no is that we were stretched pretty thin at that time. This was 1982. We had launched the Turtle Creek Corral and Razzle Dazzle Dallas. I had incorporated both of them. But they were struggling, and they needed stability and work and fundraising on their own. Every Monday night, I had DGA meetings, and I was chair of the Social Justice Committee, and I had those meetings about every other week. Texas Human Rights Foundation, at the same time, was pressing the Baker versus Wade litigation in federal court. Along with, and Texas Human Rights Foundation was the sponsor of that, and I, Lee Taft, who is here tonight, and Dick Peoples were the delegates from Dallas, driving that litigation, the Baker versus Wade litigation, which was extremely important. So it just seemed like, that there was no extra room for more, and I was afraid we would fall on our face. I thought, we can tell him no diplomatically, I guess, and Ray and John were there with me. They were stretched thin too. But I remembered something that my North Carolina grandmother said that for some reason occurred to me. She said, if you want something done, try to find a very busy person to do it. And so I said, maybe it's possible that we could do this. We sort of goaded each other into the possibility of saying yes. I said, before we say no, we have to be really careful, because if we say no, it's over. And maybe we should consider it. And John said, well, I will consider adding it to my plate, but only if the two of you will be on, not only that you say yes, we should do it, but that you'll be on the steering committee and get it done with me. So Ray is easy. He was easy. He said, let's do it. John was saying, well, we'll probably fall on our face. We probably won't make any money. This is probably a big mistake, but, they can't shoot us for trying, even if we fail. And so they were both looking at me, and I said, well, if you two want to do it, I will go along with you, but we are going to need a bigger boat. That great line from Jaws when Richard Dreyfuss first sees the big white shark. We're going to need a bigger boat. What I meant by that was that John, Ray, and I certainly had friends. But if we wanted to sell more than 3 tickets to this upcoming event, I told him, we're going to have to plug in to this group in Dallas of highly social, financially comfortable people. And the way we're going to do that, the only way I know to do it, is we're going to have to lock in the support of a guy named Dick Weaver, because he is at the epicenter of that social group. So I called Dick Weaver, and I said, Dick, John Thomas and Ray Kuchling and I have sort of a proposal we're thinking about trying to pull off here, but could you tomorrow night host in your apartment over at the Cloisters off of Oak Lawn? Could you get a lot of your friends together? And you know the friends I'm talking about. And he said, sure. He said, come on over at 7 o'clock. I'll have a lot of them here. Is anyone I can get on short notice? I'll have them here. We showed up at 7 o'clock, Ray and John and I did, and we walked into the Dickie's apartment. And sure enough, on the sofas and chairs and sitting on the floors, leaning on the walls and things like that around were these friends of his that I had met, but Dickie was the epicenter of that group. We made our presentation to them, and that night at Dickie's house, we not only got Dick Weaver and Steve Arnn and Jay Oppenheimer to agree to be on this steering committee to help us pull this once-in-a-lifetime deal off, but the rest of the folks there said, we don't want to be on the board or the committee or whatever you're calling it, but sort of like, if you build it, we will come. They said, don't worry about the tickets. We'll buy the tickets. Just go ahead and do it. Don't worry about the tickets. That's all I needed to hear. If the tickets were going to be sold, that means you might be able to break even. So from that point on, the Black Tie Dinner, the very first one in 1982, became, a project that was on a roll. There was only one sticking point. Jim Foster had told us very clearly that his concept of this, and Steve Endine's concept, was that this would be a Human Rights Campaign Fund dinner. It would be a HRCF event, okay, owned and controlled by the Washington organization. Well, Ray and John and I had to figure out a way to diplomatically explain to him that Texans have this thing. We don't like following instructions necessarily from people from Washington, D.C. We just can't help it. So we're going to do this dinner, and we hope we'll make enough money to send you a check. We'll decide how much that is. Wish us luck. But this is going to be a locally owned and controlled project. So that's the way it was. And even today, 32 years later, incredibly, it's still the only one of Jim Foster's black tie dinners that is locally owned and controlled and operated here, and we send our money to HRCF. So I'm saying that not because it's just a nuance, but because that autonomy and independence that we had from HRCF actually worked miracles on the black tie dinner itself, and in fact helped HRCF. Here's what happened. The first year we made some money and we sent all the extra money. We decided how much it was. We sent it to Washington. They were happy to get it. They were sort of thrilled that it worked. The second year, though, we decided, because we could, that we'll share this money with HRCF and the Federation for AIDS-related organizations. We'll have an additional beneficiary. So the third year, we said, we've just created this Foundation for Human Understanding, which we all know now is the Resource Center Dallas. And it has within it the AIDS Resource Center, the clinic, the food pantry, DGA. Let's make that a beneficiary also. We'll share the money with them, and we'll send some money to Washington. The next year, and I'll stop this with the next year it mushroomed into a much bigger concept. What we decided was $150 a ticket, $50 was the cost of the dinner, $50 would go to Washington to HRCF, and the other $50 we'd go around to all the 501c3s that we could gather in Dallas and tell them, if you will commit to buy a certain number of tables and chairs, you will be a potential beneficiary. All you have to do is guarantee, and I can't remember whether it was 2 tables or 5 tables of 10 each or something, but this number, you have to agree to that, and then all you have to do is when you sell a ticket, $50 of the cost, $50 goes to HRCF, and the ticket holder gets to decide where that other $50 goes. So, if you sell the ticket, you can convince your friends to designate your organization as that other beneficiary. What that meant was Turtle Creek Corral, Metropolitan Community Church, Texas Human Rights Foundation, Oak Lawn Community Services, all went out because they wanted to be potential beneficiaries, and they shook their own trees selling tickets. Tickets were flying out the door, and cash was flying in. And so that became the secret of the Dallas Black Tie Dinner that mushroomed it into this biggest HRCF fundraiser and biggest local fundraiser. Because everyone else was trying to make money for their own organization. So we owe a lot to that very first group. You know, you always owe so much to that first group before it becomes popular. And so I always sort of honored them. I mean, I was going to say, who were those people? And there's people in this room tonight, and I'm looking at a couple of them, who will recognize every one of these names. McKinney, McMillan, Hargett, Terrell, Hughes, Ellis, Pettit, Little, Lawler, Higginbotham, McClary, Justice, Harp, Hirsch, Sobieski, Ark, Ashman, Levy, Evans, Harris. Did I leave anyone out? Yes, I left a lot of people out, but I just had a little card. So those are the people who signed on to this project from the very beginning. The project started going year after year. Becky Kidd, the effervescent, lovely lady, my second cousin, she was the first woman on the Black Tie Dinner steering committee. But very soon, women became the leaders of the black tie dinner. Carolyn Dunbar became the chair of it and have been the greatest leaders of black tie dinner. Oh, as great. Let's keep it equal. I stayed on the black tie dinner board, or we just call it the dinner committee, for 9 years. Ray and John stayed 1 additional year, so they were 10-year veterans, and we rolled off. And you know, we all had our careers that we were working on. We were all, by that time, involved in other organizations, and there's so many things you can dedicate your time to. And so that was great, and black tie dinner was in great hands. We were not at all worried about that. But I was sort of grumped that I wasn't getting to spend as much time with John Thomas as I had been, and he was grumped about that too. So he calls me at the office one day and says, "This isn't working. We're not on the black tie dinner committee anymore, so we never see each other. You know, you're all doing CASA stuff now." So anyway, he said, "What we got to do is we have to make an appointment with each other once a month. Let's pick the second Friday of every month, forever. We will get together for dinner and a movie." I said, "That's an excellent idea." I said, "I'll mark my calendar, second Friday every month, dinner and movie." And he said, "Okay." And so he gets his, you know, John always carried the leather-bound organizer with him with everything in it, all of his bills. And he marked off every second Friday. So for years, we did that. And that continued the relationship that was so important to me. And by 1998, John's health was declining pretty noticeably, and it wasn't as comfortable for him to get out and have dinner and go to a movie. So I said, you know, really a second Friday thing, it was never about the movies and dinners. So why don't I'll just make some lasagna, bring that over on second Friday nights, and we'll sit on, or I'll go get Chinese food if you don't like my lasagna, but we'll sit on your couch, put our feet on the coffee table, and we'll watch TV. And that was what we'll do. And we did that all during 1998. John died on the 20th of January of 1999. And I had I was in Virginia at a family reunion on the 20th of January. And I called my answering machine back in 1999. That's, I guess, what we had. And I got the word. And I checked my schedule, my return flight, and I was going to be able to be home by the 22nd. And the memorial service was going to take place at the Cathedral of Hope on the 23rd. And it was going to be, you know, this incredible event with the full Turtle Creek Chorale and orchestra, and, you know. So, and, you know, it was a very important thing for a lot of people to be there. That morning on the 23rd, I was getting cleaned up and getting ready for the day, and I get a call from John's brother. He said, "Mike, we want you to sit with the family. Would you do that?" And I said, you know, never being one to turn down preferred seating at a standing room only event, I said, "Sure, I'll do that. That would be an honor." And he said, "We've just found out that Gene Nelson is coming up from Houston." She said, "We know that you're tight with Gene Nelson." Gene Nelson was Bill Nelson's 75-year-old grandmother. Bill had died 7 years earlier. And I said, "Yeah, I'll take care of her. I'll escort her down the aisle, and I'll sit by her, and I'll take, you know, that's no problem at all. That's a great honor." At the event, the memorial service at the Cathedral of Hope, of course, every moment of it was memorable, and it was standing room only, even in that huge auditorium. But Gary Lanham, John's partner the last several years of his life, did a beautiful eulogy. And in that eulogy, he was talking about how organized John was. He's sort of talking about his life with John. He says, "You wouldn't believe what an organization person this was." For example, he said, every second Friday night was reserved for dinner and a movie with Mike Anglin. Forever, he said. So I was very touched that he mentioned that. I owe it to my friend, John Thomas. I owe it to my friends Bill Nelson and Terry Thibodeau and Ray Kukling. I owe it to all 64 of my dear friends who lost their battles with AIDS to stand not only as a survivor, but as a witness to their short but extraordinary lives. And to do that, to find the words, if you'll let me, I would like to turn the pages back to 1986 one more time. 1986, the fourth black tie dinner. As you know, the Black Tie Dinner developed this tradition of giving a humanitarian award every year. We call it the Kukling Award now because it was named for Ray after he passed away. The first year, or actually the second dinner, it was given to John Thomas. But after that, John said, if we're going to do this every year and have a humanitarian award, we need to make it a little more interesting for the Black Tie Dinner committee, at least, and put some suspense in it. So here's what we need to do. A couple of months before the dinner, the board will discuss the possible recipients of the humanitarian award for that year. We'll vote, secret ballot, first, second, and third choice. We'll give those ballots to Mike, and he'll go home, and he'll count the ballots, and he'll be the only one that knows who the winner is. Because he's a lawyer, he has to keep secrets. So that became one of my jobs on the Black Tie Dinner. I had to arrange for the plaque to be engraved, and then on the night of the dinner, I would take the stage at the appropriate time and make the presentation of the humanitarian award for that year. In 1984, it went to Dick Weaver for obvious reasons, for his critical importance to the Black Tie Dinner. And anyone that tells the history of Black Tie Dinner who doesn't mention Dick Weaver doesn't know the whole story. 1985, it went to Don Baker, the courageous plaintiff in Baker versus Wade, who was mentioned earlier tonight. But in 1986, I counted the ballots. It went to Bill Nelson. Well, I was freaking out. I mean, there's no problem in getting the plaque engraved. No problem keeping a secret. No problem making sure that he was going to be in the audience to receive the gift. But how in the world would I ever come up with the words to describe this bundle of energy, this person with fanatical commitment to his community, this devotion to the needs of others? How do you ever do justice to that? I mean, I felt I was pretty lame with words. And so I didn't know what I was going to say, but before the dinner happened, I stumbled upon, quite by accident, something that had been written by George Bernard Shaw back at the turn of the century. And I thought, I've never read anything that so perfectly described Bill Nelson than this thing written so many years ago by George Bernard Shaw. It sounded like something Bill would actually say. So I thought, when I present the award to him at the Black Tie Dinner, this is what I'm going to use to call him to the stage. And so if you'll let me, for old time's sake, I would like to say it one more time, because it describes not only his life, but John's life, and Terry's, and so many other people that we know, and I know you're thinking about them too. This is what George Bernard Shaw said around 1906. He said, I believe that the truest joy in life is being used for a purpose, seen by yourself as a mighty one. It's being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and that as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is rather a kind of splendid torch that I've got a hold of for a moment. And I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Thank you.